I am so very tired, and I know so are so many others. But we try anyway. O Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Today, we speak of Asmongold. He had some rather unfortunate words to say, and I can kind of see the sort of fairness and kindness that any decent person owes another who they know not, what he may have been going for with a different North American culture. What I hope he meant to say was that if a police officer is chasing an offender or just walking their beat trying to uphold the law, and the criminal they are chasing randomly picks up a rock, turns around, and hurls it at their head, or while they're walking the neighborhood someone leans out the window and throws a bottle, a brick, a rock at their head, they should be allowed to defend themselves. And because a stone hurled at force and accuracy has been since ancient time a weapon of war, like literally ancient armies had slingers, skirmishers that were used to kill people in war. In modern times we have much more dangerous weapons, but that doesn't mean that a stone hurled with strength, skill, or just ill fortune cannot seriously injure or kill someone. And so I think the argument that he wanted to make, that he was trying to make, was that when assaulted with a potentially deadly weapon, a police officer should be allowed to defend themselves with equally deadly force. That is, at least, what I hope he was trying to say, like when it happens, when pursuing a suspect or at random. But that's not what he actually said. What he actually said is unfortunate and easy to interpret in other ways. So now, let's all carefully listen while he confirms and recontextualizes and explains and elaborates what he said and what he meant to say in a rather unfortunate manner.
They're trying to get you deplatformed, quoting you out of context, people not even watching. What is this here? They're trying to get me banned. MAGA influencer has 12 million followers across. I think I have more. I think they should use actual ammo. They should use deadly force. He said, shoot on sight, absolutely. Of course, set an example. Asmongold is a far-right extremist who claims Trump very obviously watches his streams for policy ideas. What? And by the way, I can't reply to it because I'm blocked. I don't know. I think anybody who's going around and trying to hit police officers, there's no reason why anybody should be supporting that. Again, I've said this before. Anybody throws a rock or tries to harm one of the police officers, I think they should just use deadly force to stop it from happening. There's no reason why anybody should be putting up with that. It's disgusting, honestly, that there's so many people that are okay with it.
And by the way, they cut this out.
Well, I advocate for self-defense only. I don't think they should just go out and shoot people randomly. Of course not. It's crazy. I was advocating for, so I'll repeat my position on this. If you are violent towards a police officer and you use anything that could be used as a deadly weapon, I think the police officer should be able to shoot you and kill you. Anything else other than that is denying a person their basic right of self-defense and self-preservation. Police officers are people. They should not be treated like punching bags, training dummies, just because you haven't taken your medication for the day. Why is this even a question? Well, the reason why it's a question is because there's people that want to be violent to police officers and they want to be able to get away with it. Do you remember back whenever the Florida guys, whenever they were having the riots, said that if you try to assault our police officers, we'll contact your family on where to pick up your remains? Is this it?
So, if you spit on us, you're going to the hospital and in jail. If you hit one of us, you're going to the hospital and jail and most likely get bitten by one of our big, beautiful dogs that we have here. If you throw a brick, a firebomb, or point a gun at one of our deputies, we will be notifying your family where to collect your remains at, because we will kill you graveyard dead.
There it is. That's my position. I agree with Florida.
Now, let's have the most relevant bit again.
Throws a rock, or I don't know. I think anybody who's going around and trying to hit police officers, there's no reason why anybody should be supporting that. Again, I've said this before. Anybody throws a rock or tries to harm one of the police officers, I think they should just use deadly force to stop it from happening. There's no reason why anybody should be putting up with that. It's disgusting, honestly, that there's so many people that are okay with it.
And by the way, they cut this out.
Well, I advocate for self-defense only. I don't think they should just go out and shoot people randomly. Of course not. It's crazy.
And so, on the surface of it, while a very North American states kind of cultural take that potentially lethal force should be answered by lethal force, what he actually said was that if anyone throws a stone at a police officer, they should be shot. And that's a problematic take. Because when you take that take, and you also link it to the Florida police representatives, well, think about it. If somebody tells you that someone was throwing rocks at police officers, the most famous and infamous examples of such are not criminals trying to flee and randomly throwing stuff behind them, or even someone assaulting an officer on their beat. The example that comes most readily to mind to many people when we talk about rocks or bricks or bottles being thrown at police is that of protests and riots and crowd control and riot police. That is on the news. That is what is shown to us regularly. That is the image invoked when you talk about someone throwing stones or bricks at police officers. And the problem with agreeing that people should be shot when someone throws stones at police officers is that it puts you in a position not only to agree with the Florida police, but also with the former government of Nepal, which massacred a whole bunch of people and injured more than 100. And a whole bunch of other, how should I put this, tyrannical, oppressive, repressive regimes that like to present protests against them and riots against them both as riots against them, and prefer to disperse them with however much force is necessary, up to and including telling their military or their police to fire into the crowd and create massacre. And so when Asmongold and the police of Florida create this equivalency that throwing stones as police is something that should be responded with lethal force without nuance, without clarifying the specific conditions or boundaries or circumstances of such an event, it becomes really easy for people who are uninformed and even reasonable people listening, let alone malicious actors, to argue that both Asmongold and the Florida police agree with all of these tyrannical repressive regimes and the tyrants above them, that the massacre of crowds or rioters, the police shoot indiscriminately into a crowd and randomly kill people, which is what he himself says is against that, but if you respond with lethal force in a riot scenario against the crowd, that is what happens. Now, it can be argued with a bit less generosity that what he meant to say is that when somebody in the crowd picks up a brick or picks up a stone and starts to hurl it, there should be some sniper, some marksman, someone who targetedly injures and punishes only the criminal who is actually assaulting the riot police. But in practice, bullets aren't magic, and they don't magically stop or even always hit the intended target. Shooting into a thick crowd is very difficult, and most bullets in most shootouts miss. And when you miss shooting into a crowd, that just means you don't hit who you're shooting at, you hit someone else. Someone standing behind them or next to them, and even when you hit, sometimes bullets overpenetrate and they hit again people behind them who didn't throw anything. And even then, that's not self-defense. That's a sniper marksman from the safety of his perch, acting in defense of his fellow officers. Let's take a moment and get down to the street with the officer who has a heavy helmet and a riot shield and armor, and an officer on his left and an officer on his right that are equally armored. Why this matters is because from down there on the street, he has a very limited field of view. He can see through his equipment, assuming that egg or something, thrown trash or something else hasn't marred his visor. But even then, he can see the first row, he can see the second row, and maybe bits of the third row. And if someone in the first row is hurling debris or deadly weapons at the officers, maybe he can grab his gun, and maybe he can precisely hit on the first shot who he was aiming at, if he's lucky or good, or probably both. The problem is that, much with the sniper case, even if you only shoot the offender, we have seen what happens when police start shooting into a crowd. And we have seen especially what happens when a line of police, one of them starts shooting. A whole bunch of them join in. And they do so because they assume that their colleague has seen something they haven't, and that there is an active and imminent threat to their lives and to the crowd. And that they start scanning for threats, and the human brain, in fight or flight, in a deadly situation, is not made, even with all the training in the world, to always accurately recognize those threats. And if you have 60 police officers in a line, and 4 of them are spurred to fire because they think they saw someone carrying or aiming a weapon, once one of them starts shooting, you end up with massacre. But even if you didn't, even if only one person is shot, again, this is not an ideal world. All the other protesters are just going to nod their heads and go, yeah, he was going to be violent to the police and they defended themselves from us and we are all safe and there's no reason to worry. No. What happens is people get terrified, scared for their lives, and they begin to flee. And depending upon the size and how thick the crowd is and what the terrain is like, what you get most often is a stampede. And then people get trampled to death. They fall down and they get trampled. And if it was a protest of a few hundred people, you get a few dozen dead and hundreds of injuries. But if it was a protest of thousands, let alone tens of thousands, you get hundreds of deaths and thousands of injuries. This is why, despite most civilized nations having snipers present for major protests or riots or situations where there are large crowds that might be the site of an attack or a riot that could become a riot, those snipers almost never fire. They almost never fire because the moment they do, they have killed an unknown number of people and injured many, many more. As far as I understand it, standard procedure in civilized nation is to only fire when the crowd will panic anyway. That is when someone in the crowd reveals an explosive device or picks up a gun and is about to start shooting or is actively shooting, because at that point the crowd is going to panic anyway, and the best way to save the most lives is to end the incident as fast as possible. That is, as far as I'm aware, the only case where even snipers fire into crowds, because the collateral damage of panicking a massive crowd is horrendous. That's why. That's why riot police do not respond to thrown stone or bricks by firing on those throwing them. And the problem with encouraging and claiming otherwise, that without nuance, if someone is throwing a stone at police, they should be shot, is that tyrants and bad actors can take a look at that and say, look, here's Asmongold, here's the police of Florida, here's the USA through them, they also approve of our massacres. And presumably, a good, reasonable, rational person wants there to be less massacres of innocents, less death in the world, less random killings. Like he himself says, he is not encouraging random killings. That would be crazy. But in practice, by saying if you throw a stone at police, that you should be shot, and the often case in news and real life is for stones to be thrown at police in a crowd and during a riot, when you get lethal fire back, you get random killings. That's why they don't shoot back. And somebody with such a large following and so many years of public speaking experience, well, he can speak for himself and hopefully clarify what exactly he meant. Because even if he did mean one of those things, like the sniper or the riot police defending themselves, at least then we'll know exactly when he stands and what he meant to say. Because currently, what is out there and what has been said is open to interpretation in some nasty, nasty ways. And no one should have to suffer in that way, let alone end up in a situation like the GenZ protests in Nepal did, where they actually lose their lives or their loved one lose their lives because someone decides that that should be done. Because if we encourage this behavior, if we approve of it, then any would-be tyrant can take any peaceful protest, get one of their people into it, get them to throw the first rock, and then their enforcers, their police, can heroically defend themselves from the peaceful protest by massacring them. This is why this is a terrible idea. This is why it isn't done, except by tyrannical regimes. What else? Right. The rest really isn't up to me. The rest is up to, well, viewers from Europe and elsewhere, and their laws on speech and hate speech and the Second Amendment and all that legal quagmire, which somebody more qualified is better suited to comment on. As for me, well, I hope you're doing well. I hope that the last couple of days were not nice, they were at least good. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your time. With respect, Teddy Bear Prime.